So you're like a child that's wandered into the movie theater halfway through and you're wondering what's going on. This is Donny Cast on the 13th of July, 2022. And the art of storytelling is lies, don't you know? So let's get into that news. I have a reappropriated quote that is reappropriated by Mark Twain. There are lies, there are damn lies, and there are definitions. And we'll have a kind of a throughway today when we're talking about what we need to talk about. So the main kind of information, well, we're going to bury that for a second, and we're just talking about this on on the side. So I was talking to my mother today, and my mother has an honest to god degree in microbiology, and she was talking to me about the shot that shall not be named on YouTube. Um, anyway, this one, she was talking to me about the fact that there's a new traditional vaccine that is was just given a emergency authorization by the FDA. It's from Novavax. um, this article is already pretty fucking shit to begin with. Novavax is moving closer to being approved by the U.S. as the newest inoculation against COVID-19, raising hopes that more established technology will win over vaccine skeptics and increase global vaccination rates. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much when it comes to the vaccine for a lot of reasons. I didn't particularly like the fact that this article talks about both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, the most widely used, rely on messenger RNA, mRNA. These newer technologies prompt the recipient cells to produce a small amount of the virus that causes COVID 19. That's fucking wrong. Unless you really want to massage the definition of small amount of the virus, because then it's talking specifically about the spike protein on the outside. So, anyway, as opposed to the regular actual traditional vaccine, which is going to be by definition either a weakened or dead version of the vaccine or of the virus, or antigen, or it's going to be a comparable type of thing. In this case, the definition of vaccine comes from from cowpox, being used to vaccinate people for smallpox. That's literally where it comes from. The name of the cowpox in Latin or whatever. So as I move forward with this, I just pulled this up at the last second because my mother, as I was talking to her today, she was basically like, "Did you know the mRNA vaccine is essentially negative efficient?" And I was like, "Yes, I did." So hopefully you hear the dog in the background because I hear the dog in the background. So moving on, this is a article from February 3rd. I'm assuming it's from this year, but who knows at this point. In this case, it's talking about, yes, the CDC changed the definition of vaccine to be more transparent. Um, in this article, it says an archive CDC webpage from May 2018 shows the agency's previous definition of vaccine was a product that stimulates a person's immune system to produce immunity to a specific disease, protecting the person from that disease. The current definition on a CDC webpage last uploaded in September 2021 reads a preparation that is used to stimulate the body's immune response against disease. Goalposts are shifting, and we'll get into the economy in a second. So, moving on from this article that I pulled up, because I was talking to my co-host before I went live, and he was talking about they moved the goalpost, the definition of vaccine, sometime in 2021, and I was like, no, I'm pretty sure it was early 2022, and he was like, no, it's 2021. And as far as I can tell from this Miami Herald article that is actually referenced in here in a second, it's September 2021, September 27th, 2021, talking about why did the CDC change its definitions for vaccine. Agency explains move as skeptics lurk. So in this article, as I already pointed out, weakened or dead similar virus, smallpox to cowpox, where the term vaccine has its origin. Anyway, it's just the date of this being talked about. Moving forward, we have the article from our friend at Zero Hedge and good old Tyler Durden the protagonist. Well, I guess he would be the antagonist of. Speaking of definitions, the antagonist of the movie Fight Club. Emails confirm why CDC changed definitions of vaccine and vaccinated. This is a Epoch Times article, so that means it's paywalled. I can't finish reading it, but if we scroll, we actually see that well, they were up earlier tonight, but there's a whole bunch of emails that were obtained or leaked or whatever you want to call it. I don't even know if I can pull this up because it was up earlier. I'll try and get it for you guys. Anybody that's watching at home in the cheap sheets. Anyway, the changes, the definition were pushed through on August 31st, 2021 to September 1st, 2021. So later on, they actually start referencing articles being written in the Miami Herald. And this is like the third day in a row we were talking about the Miami Herald, which is funny enough. In these leaked or obtained emails, which again are still not popping up, which I find a little odd, and maybe my internet's acting up a little bit. Anyway, in these emails, um, they repeatedly speak of Twitter because they're actually following the tweets and retweets about this. The emails are discussing the fact that the vaccine doesn't fit the definition of vaccine. So they changed the definition to reflect that. So people on Twitter, primarily who they're talking about, and why you'll get later on why Twitter is valuable, use that fact that the CDC changed the definition to prove the vaccine doesn't work. So that circular logic that we can think about here, because in terms of like continue to try and refresh the page to see if it'll actually come up. In terms of this, what they're here we go with the 67 pages of emails. What they're actually discussing is the fact that like the definition of vaccine means that you're going to have that weakened, dead, or similar type of pathogen usually injected. It doesn't always have to be injected into your body, so your body's own immune or your body's own immune system can. It's a little complicated. Even me, whose mother is a microbiologist, doesn't even always remember how the immune system functions, but we have general and specific responses. In this case, your body is able to code the proteins of, say, the virus in this case, and then specifically go out and hunt them down. And even in the case that it can't find the specific proteins, it can find something. The ability to have something similar means it's a shortcut to being able to get the actual antibodies to the proteins that it's looking for. So in this case, people notice that, like, by definition, that's not how the mRNA vaccines function. So they had to change the definition because the definition doesn't work for the mRNA vaccine and how effectively or lack therefore of it works. And at that point, they moved the goalpost, and then the same people who were crying that it didn't fit the definition of vaccine cried again and said, "Hey, look, we're right," because they had to change the definition of vaccine to prove us wrong. Um, Again, like when I point this out, you can't make this stuff up sometimes. So anyway, these vaccines, like I said, they're actively discussing Twitter and other articles, including a Washington Post article, discussing what was going on back and forth to make sure that they have the adequate coverage of both vaccine and vaccinated, because obviously there it was inconvenient that the traditional definition didn't fit anymore. And by the way, the Washington Post, who they were kind of engaging with back and forth, it's owned by Jeff Bezos, the owner, or the, well, I guess for lack of a better way to put it, the owner of Amazon. It's his propaganda rag. So it's you know as I point out, you're literally watching it, or you're literally able to experience by reading these emails more or less the laundering of information in real time to conform to a narrative, something like the vein of the Russia Gate uh, Russia Gate allegations of Trump in the 2016 election. Um, if we don't have the information we need, well, if we put it out into the ether or into the media, we'll have the information we need by circular logic. Um, again, and this is both a discussion of malice and incompetence that are going on at the same time. It's people that should know what they're doing is unethical, but they're not. They're not actually able to understand that what they're doing is unethical because they're so incompetent. And believe me, when we get into the other two major stories of the day, you'll see where I'm going on this. So anyway, I did pull up that in these things, they're actually discussing the fact that IG bacteria or viruses or fractions therefore of administered to induce immunity and prevent infectious disease or its something or other. Some vaccines contain highly defined antigens, e.g., the polysaccharide or another stuff, influenza type B, or the surface antigen of uh, hepatitis B. Others have antigens that are complex or incompletely defined, e.g., Bordetella something or other antigens or live something or other. So anyway, this is what was actually discussed in the emails because this is a more complete definition of what a vaccine is and how it functions. In this case, when we're talking about what was it there, they were actually talking about in the emails the fact that they have to now change because they changed the definition of vaccine. They have to change the word of vaccine, or the definition of the word vaccinated, pointing out that people don't understand what the word immunity means, and therefore that's why they had to change it to protection. In this case, it is again interesting because me with my mild background in behavioral science and law, I understand that from different sectors of the world, a word like immunity may mean something different from a medical standpoint than it does, say, in common parlance when it comes to, say, even the law. The word immunity legally defined may be something different in the law than it is in medical science. And again, immunity by definition in common parlance may mean something along the line that you have 100% the ability to fight off something, when in reality, from a medical standpoint, it may just be a probability. That does not necessarily mean that people are wrong, that they don't understand the word immunity versus the word of protection, because from a medical standpoint, protection and immunity may end up being very similar. You're still full of shit, malice, or incompetence. So this is going to become a very relevant when we start talking about the many moving goalposts and definition in regards to the economy, the dreaded R word recession that's coming down the pipe, and later on when we start talking about uh, the moving goalposts of words and the law, when we have to go back and, I was wrong. The 10-year-old rape victim in Ohio appears to be not a hoax, a real person, and that only makes it fucking worse. So, as I clear out the next stories. So, moving on from this, the big news of today is that, well, the economy is bad. It is really bad, except it's not as bad as we thought it was, because you see someone leaked some information to, out into the media again, more of that leaking of information. And the information that was leaked out into the world involved two things. One was the consumer price index leak saying that inflation was 10.2%. That was fake. Um, and the market reacted to that last night when it was released at the end of the day. A leak. So anyway, the other thing that was put out there was stock spike after Fed leaker takes 100. This is 100 basis points, which is basically just a fancy way of saying percentage points for the interest rates. So someone again leaked the information that the Fed was going to increase interest rates to 1%, or was going to increase the interest rates 1%, instead of the speculated 0.75 basis points, um, or 75 basis points, and that wasn't true either. So, okay, so the market speculated because increasing the interest rates already from a high of 75 basis points to an even higher 100 basis points means that the Fed realizes that the economy's fucked. So now we have a report that was leaked involving both the inflation and the interest rates, and they were both used to basically like massage the market to be able to accept the penis of really bad numbers instead of, oh my god, let's fucking shit all over the place numbers. And in this case, the numbers were uh 1%, 9.1% interest, or inflation, which is already a 40-year high. And I have this one, considering that the scorching consumer price index stocks on roller coaster ride. And there's not a lot to this article. um is this the one? No, this is the one that I actually have some quotes of. So it was fairly, had some meat to the bone here. Last year, many people stuck to the, oh no, this is why this with experts like these, who needs enemies shit. Last year, many people stuck to the narrative that inflation was transitory because Janet Yellen's a fucking moron. And this year, the narrative that inflation is peaking and will soon start coming down says some douchebag, chief investment officer at Independent Advisor Alliance. Unfortunately, both consensus theories are incorrect. Who the fuck are you guys? Because anybody with like a functioning understanding of economics could have told you last year. Well, people that I was listening to at the very least, and I'm not a fucking dum dum, already knew that inflation was not transitory when you're already fucking leaking that much. You're just literally, we read an article yesterday that talked about how they, in order to deal with the economic shutdown in the small business sector, they used a fire hose instead of a fire extinguisher to put this out. And in this case, like, there's like, well, inflammation or inflation is transitory. Bullshit. When you just fucking turned on the fire hose and printed money to try and put the fire out of shutting down the economy. So again, like, who are these fucking experts that thought this, inflation was transitory and the inflation is peaking and will still come down? It's still going up, and that's why people fucking actually believe that the consumer price index of 10.2% was a real thing. And I have news for you. The leak report, the numbers are so bad that the actual bad numbers don't look so bad after the fact. There are people out there actually crowing about the fact that the leaked numbers are probably more accurate than the actual numbers that were released, because certain people, and we actually discussed this yesterday, are discussing the fact that the Biden administration is looking at a way to change the definition of recession so they don't have to use the dreaded R word this close to the 2022 midterms. They're just literally like, we can't call it a recession because even though we're already in a fucking recession, we're just waiting for it to officially be announced at this point. And again, if you think that the real numbers are coming out, I got a bridge to sell you in San Francisco, because they're going to massage the numbers to make them as palatable as possible. Because again, as this article points out, the market reacted to the numbers. The market reacted to the leaked numbers, and then the market reacts again to the quote unquote. And I can't stress this enough, as I'm literally doing air quotes in my room out in the garage. The real numbers, the market reacts. So moving on from captain, I got a degree someplace because I'm the chief investment officer at someplace that should be bankrupt because we don't know what the fuck we're doing, because we actually thought inflation was transitory because we're fucking retarded. Both consensus theories are incorrect. No shit. People were fucking saying that fucking 2 years ago, you fucking idiot. Clearly we're not out of the inflation woods yet. Some other fucking douchebag who's a managing director at an investment strategy at E-Trade. Yeah, E-Trade, yeah. So I can, this guy probably has as much knowledge of fucking, or has less knowledge about the actual economy and the markets than I do, the son of someone with a fucking degree in microbiology talking about the immune system. So that it came in above an already very high estimate shows how tricky the situation is. No, it's not fucking tricky. It's just called basic fucking common sense. and our challenge spread far beyond oil. Jesus, oil, because Putin caused that problem, right? Which is one of the few consumer goods to abate somewhat recently. Yeah, because we're releasing our strategic reserves to international markets. You fucking morons. Um, so moving on from this scorch, this just goes to show you that, like, again, to repeat it, because good salesmen repeat things over and over again. With enemies like these, who needs fucking, or excuse me, with experts like these, who needs enemies, right? It's just idiots that are literally in charge of people's pensions, saying, "Well, we didn't know because we're fucking stupid." Why are you an expert then? You don't know the fuck you're talking about. So this is from Fox Business. It says inflation surges to 9.1 in June, accelerating more than expected, new 40-year high. Economics, whatever, expected the consumer prices index to climb to 8.8 in June, which is patently untrue, because we were talking about this at least a month ago, and the numbers were already expected to hit 10. Like, there were already people talking about inflation a month ago was at 10%, and they're massaging the numbers now down. So again, the experts saying it was going to be 8.8 in June. I don't know what fucking numbers you're looking at, because everybody else is already saying, like, these look low. I don't know why they look low. So anyways, in this article, it says energy prices rose 7.5% in June from the previous month and are up 41.6% from last year. So whatever experts thought that you know inflation was transitory and it's peaking, what would make you think that when you know the oil that is somewhat abating this process is up 41.6% from last year? Gasoline, or that's energy, gasoline on average costs, wait for it, 59.9% more than it did a year ago, and 11.2% more than it did in May. What makes anybody think that anything is flattening out at this point? It's only getting worse. The bubble is just like, I wish I had the picture up of good old uh uh Belushi from Animal House, where he's I'm a zit, get it? And he's gonna spray mashed potatoes all over your face. The bubble is only getting fucking bigger as inflation makes it happen. Somebody's gonna have to pop all over the place, and we're discussing what the bubble actually is, and what the needle is going to be behind it, because all inflation is doing is making the bubble get bigger. So moving on, it says climbing 0.6%, matching an 18-year high set in May on an annual basis. Oh, this is talking about shelter costs. Shelter costs have climbed 5.6%, the fastest since February 1991, right? And then rent costs also surged in June, jumping 0.8% over the largest monthly increase since April 1986. So the great quote unquote recession that took place in 0708, we're already showing signs that we are worse than the numbers that were put out in 0708, because then we would be trying to compare apples and oranges to the numbers around 0708 to 10 to 12, the stagnation of the Obama administration. Now we're looking at numbers of somewhere in the Bush recession, or coming out of the Carter years. So, like, that's the numbers that we're looking at. So again, I don't know. Um, so moving on from that, okay, we're gonna go to actually Russia now and talk about don't poke the bear. So Russia's Gazprom hints at delay in resuming gas supplies. So I believe yeah, it's Russian state run energy giant Gazprom said Wednesday it could not hold on a key part of Nord Stream 1 operations. This goes back to Russia's ability to energy blackmail the rest of Europe. So natural gas prices in Europe have surged 70%. Um, and you're poking the bear, and whatever Russia's doing in Ukraine, because you lack the energy independence. You have people poking the bear, and you are in no position to actually do anything if the bear decides to wake up. So what's the bear going to do? They're going to energy blackmail you. And now that Canada has been coerced into turning over a turbine to the Russians. The reality of it is like Russia is using this both as an opportunity to quote unquote, and I'm doing the air quotes again, fix the pipeline, and they don't know if they're going to be able to actually turn the turbine back on, or to what degree they're going to be able to, or excuse me, the pipeline back on, and what degree they're going to be able to turn the pipeline back on to feed Europe, and more importantly, Germany, because Germany's fucking stupid. Germany doesn't even give a shit about themselves. They care about all the immigrants that they brought in to erase ethnic Germans. So in this article, it says EU allows Russia to move goods through NATO nations after Putin warning. Yeah, don't fucking poke the bear. So what you do, you poke the bear. So Russia is permitted to transit sanctioned goods through European Union nations as long as it's done by rail. The bloc's executive arm said Wednesday, because they're saying that they can't do it on the ground because that would be against the sanctions, but there's nothing in the sanctions about it being moved by rail. Yeah, because it's almost like you're trying to find a way around not pissing off the guy who's energy blackmailing you, because you need to get your energy back. Says, oh no, this is me now. I actually wrote this down. I said, I'll repeat this. If there's a good guy in all of this, it isn't Ukraine, it isn't the EU, and it isn't the West. There may not be a good guy in all this at all. It just means that anybody hitching their wagon to a particular side is choosing between bad guys and worse guys. So again, this article is talking about the Lithuania blocking the supplies that are coming out of Kaliningrad, which is on the I think it's the Black Sea. I'm probably butchering where it is, but anyway, it's this administrative state that is on the it's on the ocean. It's to allow Russia to get stuff into their main body of land. So it's like this little fuck it. I'll just show you guys. Who cares, right? So it makes more sense because I'll just butcher it to death as I sit here and try and speak off the cuff, because I'm so worthless at that. So Kaliningrad right here is this is not helping me, is it? I need a map. So Kaliningrad is this little administrative state. You could see right here. This is a fairly good picture, it appears. Right here, and you see Lithuania is right there. There's Poland, um, and Russia is through here. This is probably Russia way up here. Belarus is essentially a ally of Russia, and this is the ability for Russia to get goods from the waterways into Mother Russia itself, and Lithuania, because they all fucking hate Russia. The Baltic Sea, sorry, Black Sea. I was like, that's the one around Ukraine. So anyway, that's what's going on with that. And the EU, who told Lithuania, because Lithuania has decided that, or they asked to become, it says right here, Lithuania applied for, they told Lithuania to knock it off, and Lithuania is like, okay, yeah, I'm good, and because we need our energy, so don't poke the bear. That's the moral of the story, as I butcher that 16 different ways. So moving on to more of what's going on with don't poke the bear. We have this story that I'll have to be honest that I'm trying to wrap my head around, because it says U.S. Democrats urge new 650 billion IMF aid to Ukraine war. So in this one, like, and again, it's kind of difficult to understand because it involves the IMF and the ability that the Biden administration has to basically unilaterally push through the $650 billion of aid package to the world without needing, because anything more than $650 billion has to be congressionally approved, and they're asking for like 2.1 trillion, but of course that then has to go through Congress, but not that $650 of $60 billion. And then you have this odd term, which is SDR, and I'm like, what is this SDR? And the main point behind this is like slaves to everybody's becoming slaves to a centralized bank, because the IMF is involved with what's going on in Sri Lanka. It's involved with what's going on in the civil unrest that's going on in Argentina. And this is after Ukraine actually said they need $750 billion to rebuild during the conference that the West was basically dividing up war-torn Europe after the fact of when Russia's done chewing it up, like like it's a whatever. So in this article, it says issuing at least 650 billion in additional IMF reserve assets known as special drawing rights, which is, I guess, from what I've been able to gather, a fancy way of saying a centralized uniform currency, or SDRs, after a similar move last year would help Ukraine, its neighbors, and developing countries respond to the crises that they face on top of COVID-19, the lawmaker said. These include food shortages, rising energy price, weak vaccination rates in low income nations. More than and like I said, more than 650 billion of this has to be authorized by Congress. So somehow, some way, with all the inflation going on, the Biden administration just has the ability to pull $650 billion out of the IMF and just through this SDR, or special drawing rights, and just put it out there for everybody to have. But any more than that, well, then they can't do it because, as it says, the Democratic controlled House last July also passed the authorization for 2.1 trillion reserves creation as part of the legislation for funding the State Department and other foreign operations. But that initiative needed support in the Senate, where it failed to win. Thank you, fucking Joe Manchin. So now it's making it seem like this IMF, the budget, I now, like I said, I'm trying to wrap my head around it because it makes it seem like the budget that Joe Biden is trying to pass is directly being drawn from the IMF through this SDR and can be just spread around to all these countries willy-nilly. It just hurts my head because we just literally saw two countries collapse, in part because of some of this same type of thought, or same type of uh tactics. Because with experts like these that thought that inflation was transitory, what's $650 billion at this point, right? So, and like I said, I'm still trying to wrap my head a little bit around the story. Let's see, where am I at with my notes? Oh yeah, so going back to the Sri Lanka story, and again, I didn't entirely realize this. So this is an article from, I don't know, it's yourcommonwealth.org, as I was trying to hunt down this information. As you see, Sri Lanka moves to green policy. So this has directly tied into the civil unrest that's going on in the Netherlands, to the civil unrest that's going on in Sri Lanka, because in the 23rd of September 2015, mind you, so like what, close to 7 years ago at this point, Sri Lanka adopted the Sustainable Development Goals unanimously, and the president declared that Sri Lanka will be one of the front runners in ecologically driven economic growth. How's that fucking working out for you? So as he fled the country today, just got the fuck out of Dodge because he knows what's going on better than anybody else, because his head was probably going to be on a fucking pike. And so we got Sri Lanka in crisis after the president flees, like I just said. So now they're authorizing the military to do whatever the fuck they need to do to get the country under control, because fuck you, let's take out this loan from the IMF. And is it this country that's the IMF, or is it Argentina? I don't even fucking know. They're both involved with the IMF to a certain extent. I don't remember who's taken the loan out, or who is trying to take the loan out from the IMF. I don't fucking remember. All I know is, at this point, Sri Lanka has decided that they're going to they were going to make themselves a green economy, and they fucking fail all over the place, and now they have civil unrest because they can't feed their people. And I found this really awesome article from the Times, which is I guess one of the biggest newspapers in the world. I don't know, they've only been around for like a few hundred years. So Miss Melanie Phillips wrote, Sri Lanka shows the danger of green dogma. This is from Monday. Fallen president's ruinous obsession with organic crops is mirrored in Western net zero policies, like in the Netherlands. Right. So she writes in her article, last April, the government imposed a nationwide ban on import and use some synthetic fertilizers and pesticides in order the country's 2 million farmers to go in organic. So we can draw a parallel to this right now with both what's going on in the Netherlands and what's going on in the US and other parts of the world. But primarily, we can look at the Netherlands and their farmers' protests and the US and what the US is trying to push domestically. That's why, good old the Supreme Court coming and slapping you know, slapping the EPA in the face with a big fucking rubber dildo was fucking awesome, right? Because now they can't push these policies that have bankrupted at least two countries, or bankrupted the Sri Lanka, and I'm sure there was a large amount of mismanagement and corruption involved, and is trying to make the Netherlands go the same route of the dodo. So the results were catastrophic. She continues, domestic rice production fell sleepily, forcing a country that had long been self sufficient in rice to import 450 million worth of the stuff. So it went from self sufficient with their rice to needing to bring in $450 million. So what's the net on that? I wonder. The fertilizer ban also devastated other exports. In desperation, the government last February suspended the ban for key crops, including tea, rubber, and coconut. As Foreign Policy magazine observed, this has been a uh, farrago of magical thinking, technocratic hubris, ideological delusions, self dealing, and sheer short sightedness. So let me go back to the article where we have uh the narrative that inflation was transitory this year and the narrative that inflation is peaking and will still start coming down. Yes, with experts like these, with experts like these. So she continues, this is reminiscent, and I love this because now she's bringing in the former Soviet Union because this is technocratic like Marxism. This is reminiscent of Lysenkoism. In the 1930s and 1940s, a Soviet agricultural scientist called Lysenko claimed he could eradicate starvation by modifying seeds before. And I laugh at this because I'm well aware of the fact that he basically was like, I understand evolution better than nature because when nature has a gun to its head, nature's going to fucking move. Eradicate starvation by modifying seeds before cultivation and thus multiply grain production. Um, Tens of millions starved to death because of Lysenko's agricultural policies. What are we looking? The sheer short sightedness, the ability to think that you know better than something else because it fits your ideological means. So Lysenko's agricultural policies didn't produce enough food. No fucking shit. Any scientist who opposed him was shot or sent to Siberia. You know, I wonder if there's any parallel to cancel culture that's going on in the country, like potentially standing up against the fact that like you're changing the actual definition, as you probably maybe hear the helicopter that's going over my head. I love the fact that now I live in a war torn part of the country where I have actual police helicopters going over my head, issuing orders like at least once a week. So anyway, where we leave off. Oh yeah, so they if it's anything like the cancel culture that we have going on in the West right now, where you're speaking up against the fact that the definition of vaccine does not actually match what the mRNA vaccine does. The equivalent of being sent to Siberia is canceled off of everything and your inability to get a job. So there, she continues, there's evidence of Lysenkism all around us in the unchallengeable orthodoxies of green ideology. In the Netherlands, thousands of farmers have been protesting at proposals to curb nitrogen emissions. The Dutch government says nitrogen is a greenhouse gas pollutant and blames its high levels on fertilizers and cow-produced manures. Its plans to cut emissions by as much as 70% in 131 key areas to reach the climate goals by 2030. That's kind of a big year in terms of certain ideologies. The farmers say this will force them to slash livestock herds and close farms. Welcome to Sri Lanka, Netherlands. So moving on from um, this little segue, we have to talk about the 10-year-old rape victim that was either a hoax or well, there are shitty people out there in the world, and it turns out it wasn't a hoax. There are shitty people out there in the world. So I was listening to a podcast yesterday with Megan Fox, the reporter that broke the story, and I got to point out, I'm just so fucking tired of anything that has to do with abortion at this point, but it's kind of important. And this is me backtracking on stuff that I was saying. I was wrong. I said it was a hoax because the alternative is worse. And I'm going to skip ahead here in my notes and talk about my actual feelings on this because there's a lot to talk about. So here are my thoughts. Nobody is better off knowing about the details of what went on. The least of the person that is better off is the little girl involved. And that's what really pisses me off is like at the end of the day, like that's the person that's most affected by this. It's not a or it should not be a left versus right thing. It's not going to make anybody sleep better at night knowing that whatever you think is the lowest that humanity can stoop to, there's something actually worse. And I keep bringing this up when I bring up that we live in a country of a third of a billion people, and the probability of bad shit happening at any given time is rather fucking high, right? We've devolved to a point where getting one over on the other side, people of our own country, is what's important. It's not like we collectively don't already have a very low opinion of our institutions and culture. Somebody won here. So whoever that is, hooray for you. You won the lottery of this is bad and there's nothing good that comes from this. So yeah, I was wrong. I said it was a hoax because as I was listening to Megan Fox on Nick Rekieta's podcast last night, they were talking about how actually bad this is. The Megan Fox, the reporter who broke the story, um, that the abortion activist doctor Caitlin Bernard, she basically went into hiding and was basically hoping that they were bringing up she's hoping that it's a hoax because the alternative is worse than if it was a hoax, because the best case scenario was it was a hoax and it's not a hoax. And I have a whole bunch of information on this. So to start off, remember that the Dobbs decision, the Dobbs versus Mississippi that overturned Roe versus Wade, that happened on June 24th. Um, so this child was politicized for the benefit of adults, and I'm wondering like when we're going to change the definition of rape because this is bad. So moving on, we have a tweet, and again, Twitter is not real life, but the CDC at the very least thinks it's real life enough to be involved with changing the definition of vaccines. So this AN Max Nordu, I don't even know who this guy is. It just pops up where he says an illegal alien impregnated a 10-year-old who could have gotten a legal abortion for health, but they went to Indiana anyway, and the mandated reporter broke the law and didn't report the crime. The illegal alien racist is allowed to post 2 million bail. Am I understanding this correctly? And this is as a response to, yes, it's real, breaking arrest made, and 10-year-old Ohio girl that led to Indiana abortion, drawing international attention. Yeah, hooray, somebody won on this one. And we got more news on hooray, somebody won on in Uvalde later on today. So the best place, one of the best places to get news is from the website, Not the Bee, which is a parody site of a parody site, because you the Babylon Bee, their stories end up being prophetic at this point. So this story, and I have to stress, the main point behind this is the story that I'm showing you is from the 12th, and it's the Ohio Attorney General just said there's no proof that the viral 10-year-old abortion story ever happened. But Washington Post, remember Jeff Bezos, fact checker, says it's attained the status of fact anyway, somehow. And I point this out because later on we can see down here at the bottom, there's some tweet from some Greg Price guy, I don't know who the fuck it is, says breaking: Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost says there is not a whisper that a 10-year-old child was raped and impregnated. Again, this is really making me fucking want to go drinking, and I don't drink. There have been no requests for a crime lab results, and Ohio's heartbeat law would have allowed such a young girl to get an abortion in the state, right? Now, you can see on here that this tweet came from July the 11th. So, backtracking to Dobbs being on the 24th, and dates kind of mean something. So moving on from this article, just kind of giving a timeline of this week, because this happened over the weekend with Biden coming out and running his suckhole again. We have the Babylon Bee being a better fucking source for news than anybody else. Alleged illegal alien arrested for the rape of the 10-year-old girl that went viral recently. Here's why it took so long. Um, and in this story, we have some good quotes to kind of piece together a timeline behind this that and I'll show you good old Mark Twain, so you don't have to stare at text. So it says Columbus police were made aware of the girl's pregnancy through a referral by Franklin County Children's Services that was made by the mother on June 22nd, right? Detective Jeffrey Hunn testified Wednesday morning at Fuentes, that's the dickbag piece of shit illegal immigrant. His testified at the Fuentes arraignment on June 30th. The girl underwent a medical abortion in Indianapolis. Hunn said. So the actual complaint that came down on the 22nd of June took place 2 days before the Dobbs decision. So whatever the Ohio law was, and we'll talk about the Ohio law here in a second, the actual report of this took place before Dobbs actually hit the pipe. So the ability to actually get an abortion in Ohio had nothing to do when this was reported, had nothing to do with Dobbs, right? And it says on the 30th, the girl underwent a medical abortion in Indianapolis. So there's an 8-day period between when it was reported and when the actual abortion took place, and Dobbs took place on the 24th. So the crime had already happened at the time of the Dobbs ruling. Um, well, for starters, the abortion doctor reportedly didn't report the crime as required by law. During Wednesday's hearing, Assistant Franklin County Prosecutor Dan Meyer requested Fuentes be held without bond. He said Fuentes is not believed to be in the country legally, and there are questions about his identity. Fucking awesome. And that's the meme that they were showing in the article about, like, oh shit, we get a win, and then we get like, who fucking wins here? Like, which side actually wins when we're dealing with like a 10-year-old that is marked for life at this point, right? So BuzzFeed is a massive joke of a well, I was gonna say news, but they're not news. They're for lack of a better way to put it, they are probably as bit much satire as Babylon, or they're more they have less credibility than Babylon being a satire site. So it says a top Republican cast doubt on the rape of a 10-year-old girl who had an abortion. A suspect was just arrested. So whoever this Julia Reinstein, you're a fucking piece of shit. And it says in this article, the only thing that I have in there is an officer reportedly testified at the arraignment Wednesday, said officers were alerted to the incident after a 10-year-old girl's mother reported to child services on June 22nd. We already said that, just over a week before she had an abortion in Indiana on the 30th. So we have this timeline that it appears whatever information is coming out is rather relative. So we'll get to more of my thoughts at the end here. CNN mostly not trying to be unbiased in this case. A man was charged in the rape of a 10-year-old who traveled to Indiana for an abortion. In this article, CNN, it says that DNA from the Indianapolis clinic was being tested against samples from Fuentes and the child's siblings. Dr. Kaylin Bernard, an Indianapolis based obstetrician gynecologist, previously told CNN, because she's not actually a doctor, she's an activist, and she knows people at CNN to be able to get involved and stick her snout in there to exploit a 10-year-old to show her moral compass is, that after being contacted by a child abuse doctor in neighboring Ohio, okay, remember that we have this activist getting a phone call or getting contacted by a child abuse doctor in neighboring Ohio. She recently helped a 10-year-old girl have an abortion in Indiana. That 8-day period between when the abortion took place and when the original report happened on the 22nd. The young girl was 6 weeks and 3 days into the pregnancy, Bernard told CNN. And then we have the Columbus police spokesman that said, out of compassion for victims, we will not comment on any rapes of juveniles. So that's also important to understand. So my background on in the law a little bit. when uh all these details end up being a little relevant because I'm hunting through all these articles to make sure that I have the ability to draw the best conclusion I have. Here's Daily Mail. They're garbage. Most news is in this day. I trust the Babylon Bee probably the most, or excuse me, not the Babylon, not the Bee the most. So in this one, the Daily Mail says that the child was 6 weeks, 3 days pregnant. Again, therefore ineligible by just 3 days to receive the procedure in their home state. That's what they say. The Ohio heartbeat law has to do with heartbeats can be detected roughly 6 weeks in. Again, another quote saying Ohio's heartbeat law has a medical exemption, which is broader than just the life of the mother. Somebody said this young girl, if she exists, I believe this is Yost, the attorney general that they're quoting here. This young girl, if she exists, if this is horrible thing actually happened to her, it breaks my heart to think about it. She did not have to leave Ohio for the treatment, which again, this becomes important because there's such this narrow span of time where this is taking place to get her out of Ohio and Indiana or into Indiana when the attorney general is actually saying that, like, by Ohio law, she didn't have to leave. It is unclear. This is again the article. It is unclear, however, that the girl's condition met the law's definition of emergency, going back to the legal definition of what emergency is, and if it was actually written into the law of what emergency is in this case to justify trying to get around it, which must be life threatening or involve a serious risk of the substantial and irreversible impairment of major bodily function. Now we have the law and medicine colliding with their definitions because the doctor's opinion, whether this 10-year-old girl, if it's an emergency, that they terminate the abortion because it is a serious risk of substantial and irreversible impairment of bodily function to a 10-year-old, the doctor has to make that decision. It becomes riskier once you get the court involved because obviously a judge and an attorney will not have the medical understanding of what these definitions are. They're going to go off the opinion of a doctor and the doctor's using of medical definitions versus the law's definitions of these things and how they can actually be incongruent. So we're going to have to bring the courts up here in a second when I discuss how badly this is handled. So, like I said before, this has heavily to do with the law, and the big person that gets the dopamine hit out of all this is this Dr. Kaylin Bernard. The martyrdom that I think that she was attempting to seek by her involvement in this, as the person that supposedly was going to shield this child by bringing them into another state where she worked at the University of Indiana, and she's an activist. And look at me, I saved this child because the system is against them. We need abortions. And I actually watched congressional hearings today involving douchebag politicians asking activists about their thoughts on infanticide, the killing of child after the child is born, and these activists would not answer the question because they kind of knew it was a gotcha and they're pieces of shit. So my overall opinions on abortion are generally starting to shift towards fuck you, because when you have enemies like these, who needs experts? So the idea is the law itself, our criminal justice system, the courts have a lot of things in place to shield children, rightfully so, from uh being disclosed upon. So the attorney general of Ohio, there's a possibility that he may not have been able to find out anything because of all these shields that are in place for juveniles. Um, but I can tell you that the publicity behind all of this is going to make this case very difficult, even though they said that the douchebag illegal admitted to the crime. And hopefully you hear that horn going on. It's a great time to be streaming. I guess I should remember this in the future. So, what are we looking at? Because we have issues of going in between states. You have uh, the custody issues of evidence. there's a whole bunch of questions. So in this case, we have certain people that we have to talk about. We have the detective that was named someplace up here. If I can hunt down his name, uh, it doesn't. Detective Jeffrey Hunn. So this detective Jeffrey Hunn, I'm not going to say he's a bad guy at this point. I can kind of point out that he may be in a rock and a hard place. Depending on let's see, the horn is kind of distracting me for a moment as I try and think about this. So this detective, he's going to be notified of a crime. It's going to come down from this social services, more than likely that a crime took place. Yeah, Franklin County Children's Services is going to notify him because of the mother notified them, which means they're going to notify Jeffrey Hunt. And Jeffrey Hunt is going to show up, and he's going to start talking to these people. He has the ability, the tools in his toolbox to go to a court and get court orders in order to deal with this situation. So how the child actually wound up in Indiana, I have no fucking clue, because if he needed to, and I'm not saying I would advocate doing this, he can actually go get a judge to issue um orders to keep the child in the state, and not only keep the child in the state, to have the child go do certain, for lack of a better way to put it, medical procedures through court supervision, especially if the detective is worried that the evidence is going to magically disappear, especially by going out of state. He himself has limited abilities to hold the child in the state, um, to prevent them from leaving. So for the most part, he's going to show up, he's going to take the report, he's going to activate the system, turn in his paperwork. He's obviously not going to be there with them 24 hours a day and whipping out his handcuffs when he finds out he's going to leave the state. That's not the job of the detective. So I don't know, but the part of the problem behind this is, even with social service, the judge and all the district attorneys, or the assistant district attorneys, it's who knows about what, and eventually somebody got involved or got in touch with this abortion advocate in Kaylin Bernard, and she leaked the story. So whatever shielding was going on with the child, well, there wasn't a lot of shielding going on in place. And the larger problem that we're looking at when we're discussing what went on is, eventually Kaylin Bernard, who was contacted by a doctor in Ohio, said, yeah, come on down to Indianapolis. And then you have chain of custody, because who actually told anybody, reported anything? Was there an activation of the civil services that took place with this minor when she went to Indiana? Because now we're talking about certain components of law when it comes to conspiracy to commit certain acts through the interstate, that makes this even more complicated, because this detective and the court system, the law enforcement, you have the chain of custody of being able to establish where this was collected from and how it got there. So the detective would either have to traveled with them to Indiana, or after the fact, the abortion clinic itself did the procedure and then contacted him and said, hey, we're holding on to this, come pick this up. Or another law enforcement institution within Indiana picked it up and transported. I mean, it just gets really bad, because later on down the line, with the prosecution of this Fuentes piece of shit, you're going to have to establish all of this in order to say, for him not to turn around and say, that's not mine. Like, how did that get here? You have to establish where it was, who had control of it, and if who here is actually trustworthy enough to believe how it went from point A to point B to point C, when the Attorney General of Ohio is saying the child never actually had to leave the state in the first place. And the other problem is, if this is such a big issue for the child, the emergency portion of the law taking place and triggering, versus it not being an emergency, having to wait the 8 days between the original report and then going to Indiana to have the abortion procedure take place. Like, how big of an emergency is an emergency? We're back to Bill Clinton and his famous law line of, it depends on what the definition of is again, right? Moving goalposts and definitions. lies, damn lies, and definitions. So, and this is all going on behind all this. What judges knew what district attorneys knew what civil service knew what detective knew what. This is the actual establishment institutions, the ones that we're supposed to have faith in, doing their job, and who was leaking what to what, because now we have this abortion activist, uh, Kaylin Bernard, getting involved and leaking this. And at what point she found out about it and she leaked it for her own purposes, because obviously HIPAA doesn't mean anything to her. And if you don't know what HIPAA is, it's basically your medical privacy stuff, right? So this is all going on, and once you get this abortion activist involved, more importantly, how they got involved, if children are have so much protection by the legal system, because they obviously don't, because she learned about it, she leaked it for political points. And you have to be able, I shouldn't say you, the court, in order to prosecute this individual, has to be able to tie all these strings together to a narrative, to a judge and a jury down the line, in order to convict this guy. And it becomes so murky at this point that justice is becoming more and more unlikely, because it's politicized, and there's certain outside agendas that are involved with all of this. So as heinous as this is for this 10-year-old girl, it doesn't fucking matter, because someone got their jollies off about trying to push this case that probably did not need to occur or take place the way it did. And I have serious questions that no one is answering, because at this point they're not answering the right question, because it turned into, was this a hoax or not? And it looked like it was, because the alternative was, you may have judges, attorney generals, social services, detectives conspiring with an abortion activist to politicize this thing over across state lines, because it didn't need to take place the way it did. And there may be larger, if we had a functioning FBI, you would potentially even get to learn about some of these aspects, and we don't, because fuck you, it doesn't matter. But someone gets a win here, and it's not a 10-year-old girl. So let's moving on, sticking with the abortion issue and why the definition of things is the definition of things. So we have abortion services still accessible to detained migrants after Supreme Court ruling, ICE memo says. The big issue that I have to talk about with this is, again, the politicization of something for points. More importantly, the power that the Democrats have and the Republicans want, because in this case with this memo, it really doesn't actually matter. The Dobbs decision, setting aside Roe, doesn't have that big of an impact, because from a federal standpoint, the laws that the federal government has or does not have are separate from the laws of individual states. And back when I was doing my thing in the day, I have a fair degree of understanding of both federal jurisdiction and concurrent jurisdiction and state jurisdiction. In this case, it comes down to the law, because depending on what is federal land, what is not federal land, what is federal land by proxy of the law, stating that if the federal government occupies something, it becomes federal law versus, or federal land versus, it's technically state land, but it's being occupied. I mean, it gets really murky really fast. And then on top of that, you have the good old Hyde Amendment, which says that federal dollars will not be going to will not be used for abortions. But then you don't even need to do that on federal land, because you can have profits go in and basically take over the actual operation of these abortions, because they're saying in this case this is for women, illegal immigrants that have been raped, or in blah blah blah. Who cares? There's a whole bunch of jumps, or whole bunch of hoops that the Biden administration is jumping through just to keep this a story, because they know that they have nothing in the 2022 midterms, because they're changing the definition of what a recession is, and potentially cooking the books when it comes to both to inflation. So this is the only thing that they have, and they really need to stir that pot, because what they're talking about in this is, because they're still going to actually be able to uh, give illegal aliens abortions, they're going to start shipping them to other states when necessary, just to really give it to the other side. Fuck you. That's how important this issue is to these people. Um, yeah, there's no winners here again. So moving on to there are no winners. And when you have a culture, moving on to my thoughts, when you have a culture that treats children the way that we currently are in this country, and this has not entirely to do with the the argument about whether or not children or the the fetus slash bundle of cells slash unborn child, whatever you want to name it, involved with abortion is. I'm just saying in general, when your value of your children in your country is this low that they can be like that we talked about yesterday with the father standing up yelling at Joe Biden in this obvious photo opportunity, this clickbait story, because you're willing to prostitute your children for political power, you have to wonder how much value your culture has left, how much you're running on moral empty at this point. So in this case, we're talking about Uvalde video, and I watched it yesterday, and I really don't want to show it. I probably should have thought about it ahead of time, but now that I think about it, I don't want to watch it again because you literally had some cop in Uvalde in the hallway in the school using hand sanitizer, and you had other cops that looked like they were so bored that they were they were flipping through things on their smartphones. It does not make them look very good. And the city council in Uvalde was more more worried about the optics of it than they were how shitty their law enforcement looked in the video, because they were whining about the video. It was like 7 minutes video that was edited, was leaked to the public, and they were more concerned with the family should have saw it before it got leaked, but it's so bad. My question is, why wasn't this put out there like the day after it happened? Because it looks bad. There's like 4 minutes of the shit bag wandering around outside the school before law enforcement gets there. The edit that I saw cuts out as the cops get to the doorway, and then it starts cutting back and forth to the gaggle of cops that look unorganized and fucking retarded in the hallway as they flag each other and have no fucking clue how to respond. I mean, it was just a shit show. And like, my negligible background in military and law enforcement, I'm just sitting there like, not only am I pissed off about the children, I'm pissed off that you have people that are supposed to be in official professional positions looking like they have no fucking clue what they're doing. So yeah, Uvalde, um, you get the government that you fucking deserve, and you get the police department you fucking deserve because of the government that you fucking elected, because you don't give a shit. So fuck off. I'm over that as much as I'm over abortion at this point. And then to our daily our daily, because we have to talk about California, because this is how fucking stupid the world is. Um, to end the day after showing how little faith that you should have in your government and your institutions, and how much you should not be relying, I should rephrase that by not saying you, how much we should not be relying on anybody but ourselves to get us out of problems, instead of passing the buck to somebody else so they can leak it for personal gain. California blocks gun sales to those at risk of breaking the law. So now you have California unilaterally deciding ahead of time whether or not you should be able to buy guns. And at this point, this is a state that can't even protect their records when it comes to gun ownership in the country or in their state, because all that stuff got leaked out into the ether. This is the same state that now says, like, we're going to decide when you're not allowed to buy guns because reasons. And this is in the same bill that they just passed. You're allowed to sue gun manufacturers and gun gun dealers based off of the way the guns were used. Yeah, yeah. I don't have much else to say on that one. Let's see. So it says gun makers and dealers in California will be required to block firearm sales to anyone that have reasonable cause to believe at substantial risk. Again, definitions. What is the definition of reasonable cause, and what is the definition of believe, and what is the definition of substantial risk? And some of you at home may be going like, I understand these words, but from a legal perspective, you have to reach certain criteria. That's why, you have a jury having to reach what reasonable doubt is, and you have to be able to define what reasonable doubt is. Uh, in this case, like, what is reasonable cause? There is not a threshold, an objective threshold for this. So now you get a judge, preferably if you do actually get due process, being able to make the decision that you do or do not have reasonable cause based off of some type of complaint filed by somebody or law enforcement to believe that you are, again, what is a substantial risk of using a gun illegally or harming themselves or others under a new state law that douchebag Gavin Newsom announced Tuesday that was signed. And again, you can sue gun manufacturers. Um, I guess we need to change the definition of freedom to something along the lines of what the government tells me to do or allows me to do, or sits in a hallway and hand sanitizes their hands. So anyway, I think that's about it. It's an hour and 10 minutes. I'm pretty depressed. So yeah, have a yeah